Chicken Yogi Show, the podcast that brings you spiritual wellness discussions from the chicken yogi, Kit Kilstow. Broadcasting from their homestead, the spiritual home of the Akium Institute, Kit helps you find the magic within to overcome life's struggles and live your authentic life. Their focus is on what they call trauma-sensitive spiritual wellness, the ability to tap into your inner magic and access your spiritual self with supportive, nurturing care. Listen to deep dives on spiritual topics, as well as practical tips to create the magic you need to live well and live authentically in the Chicken Yogi Show. Hello, and welcome to the Chicken Yogi Show. I'm your chicken yogi, Kit Kilstow. And today I want to talk about the subject of affirmations as well as neurodivergence. And I'm sure that a lot of people aren't thinking about those two things together, but really there's an entire ecosystem of self-help tools and tools that people use to help create their ideal and authentic life that don't really work well with the neurodivergent brain. And so today, in part because I've started posting affirmations on my social media to try to help people, I want to talk a little bit about how I, as a neurodivergent person, as well as broaden that out a little bit more generally to neurodivergence in general, would deal with affirmations. So let me just start by defining affirmation. When I go out to Google, the definition that comes up, the first definition is the action or process of affirming something or being affirmed. And I was always taught that you don't use the word that you're defining to define that word. That seems a bit circular. And so I want to go with the second definition, which is emotional support or encouragement. An affirmation is a short phrase or maybe a series of phrases that you repeat to yourself to help bolster your self-esteem, to encourage yourself, and try to create positive and lasting change in your life. Affirmations have really been grabbed by the law of attraction and mindset people who believe that if you affirm something, you can make it true in your life. There's been many stories about it working. There's been many stories about that not working. I don't want to debate whether affirmations work or not. I feel like with anything, if it works for you, great. If not, put it to the side, move on and find another tool that works for you. We are all individuals and we need to find tools that work best for us. The affirmations, though, that the law of attraction people try to get you to believe are speaking as if things have already happened. My annual salary is $100,000 a year. Fun fact, it is not. But if this is something that I want to manifest, I want to manifest a certain amount of money. I want to manifest the ideal romantic partner. I want to manifest a vacation to a tropical destination. Whatever you want to manifest, in that law of attraction world, which really is based a lot on toxic positivity, which is something we'll get into here in a bit. But in that law of attraction world, you speak as if you already have it. I have booked a vacation to the Bahamas for October 2022. You say that affirmation over and over and over again, and eventually you make it true. Again, there's many reasons for that. There's many people that say it works, it doesn't work. Personally, I believe that affirmations work on a vibrational level, but also on a level, what we think about, we act upon. What we think about, we try to make happen. I know in my own life, if there's something I need, that seems to be a little bit out of my price range, I'm going to, think about, well, how do I budget for this? What can I do to make this happen for me? How can I make this really work for me? And so to me, an affirmation works on a bit of the practical as well as the spiritual levels. And no, I don't have any amazing tales of manifesting millions of dollars or anything, but more I use them to remind myself of truths that I already know. So I don't affirm that I make $100,000 a year. that doesn't really work for me. And it doesn't really work for my neurodivergent brain. Here's why. Toxic positivity is when you are saying and being more positive, more upbeat about something as a way to basically wash it away. Yes, if you're dealing with mental health issues, somebody might say, well, just smile a lot. That'll make you happy. And yes, there are times I found when I've been feeling kind of down, if I look at my cats or watch my horses or even my chickens, watch them interact with one another, and I'll find myself smiling and I'll be like, yeah, I feel better. It's not necessarily the smile, though, that makes me feel better. It is the actual action of what I'm doing, watching my livestock, watching my cats, watching the pigs interact. Maybe I, throw some horse treats in my pocket and go out to the pasture and feed everybody treats and kiss their noses. And that's what's making me happy, as opposed to just simply putting a smile on my face. As somebody who's been in customer service for a couple of decades, way longer than I want to be, they always say when you talk to a customer, put a smile on your face, because that smile will come through in your voice. And I believe that for some people, yes, that works. For neurodivergent people, such as myself, not so much. And in fact, I can vouch, I've had employers say, well, your tone of voice on the phone isn't good. It's like, did I help them? Were they happy at the end of the call? Yeah. Okay. What's your problem? So I feel like as a neurodivergent person, affirmations basically have to be two things. One, they can't be lies. I can't say I'm something I'm not. I am an international speaker and superstar who talks to people about how to hatch their authentic life. No. Now, I do talk to people about how to hatch their authentic life, but I'm not an international superstar. People don't know my face on sight. I don't know that I would want that level of fame. But also, I can't lie to myself like that, because immediately your mind goes, yeah, right. That's not the truth. That's not the way things are. The quote unquote gurus out there who talk about affirmations will tell you that that's your self-sabotaging. I prefer to think of it as being realistic, because it is much more fulfilling and much more reasonable for me to say, I am here, I want to be there. This is the way things are right now. This is what I'm dealing with right now, in whatever realm I'm dealing with it. But I want to take this, shift this, and move forward into this new paradigm. Okay. Now that we're in that much more comfortable place of saying, hey, I acknowledge that I have a ham sandwich right now. I really wish I had roast beef. Then you can say, okay, how do I get from a ham sandwich to roast beef? Well, this is what I need to do. And that's where my version of affirmations come into play. My affirmations, and the way I think of affirmations and see them, are as supports. So instead of affirming, and I'll use that sandwich story because it is very benign, doesn't hit anybody's button, so it should be pretty trauma informed. I have a ham sandwich, I want a roast beef sandwich. The law of attraction people would tell you to start affirming, I have a roast beef sandwich. And there's nothing that's going to magically transform your ham into roast beef, or vice versa if you have roast beef and really want ham. Man, it's starting to get lunchtime. I'm a little bit hungry here, I think. But instead, you can start affirming things like, I make good sandwiches. I am able to support my needs. I am able to eat every day, which is something to be grateful for and something to affirm, because there are people out there who don't have any sandwiches at all. And so you want to obviously acknowledge and have gratitude for what you are able to do, especially if, as a neurodivergent person, and this is something myself and my spouse have talked a lot about, but as a neurodivergent person, until you realize, either through self-diagnosis or even not even something so formal as a self-diagnosis, but just hanging around with the autistic or the ADHD or the neurodivergent community and going, yeah, my brain works that way. There's a point before that realization, however that realization happens for you, where you're told a whole bunch of stories by the people around you. For example, I was always weird. I had a weird aunt that I hung around with that, and so, I was like my weird aunt. I had fanciful ideas that would never come to fruition the way my mother did. You start to hear that if you know about neurodivergence. You start to think, oh, she comes from a neurodivergent family. And I bet I do. I'm just my generation would just be the first generation that actually had that looked at. And in my case, it took 46 years for myself to come to that realization. I remember having a conversation a couple years ago with my grandma and saying, Grandma, I think I'm autistic. And her only frame of reference is my cousin, who is also autistic and has different support needs. And so she's like, I don't think you want to say that about yourself. And I'm like, okay, I understand you're coming from a different frame of reference, but these things really make sense, and we'll just go talk about something else now. And that was the last time I tried to have that conversation with any member of my immediate family. I don't know if they'll ever stumble across this podcast, but hi, everybody. I'm autistic and have ADHD, and it's really kind of wild that nobody figured this out before now. Anyway, you cannot be as obsessed with chickens and horses as I am without having some sort of special interest. I will just say that. So, those of us who especially have late in life diagnoses or self-diagnoses or self-realizations, whatever framework you want to put around that, we tend to be told a lot of stories. And so for me, affirmations are my way of counteracting those stories. When you grow up in a certain way, you're taught that you're not lovable. You're taught that nothing you do ever turns out right. Well, those are absolute statements, and there's psychological reasons why people who experience trauma make absolute statements, but also there's enough evidence that absolute statements are not true. If it rains for 3 or 4 days in a row and you say, oh, it's always gray and overcast and raining. Well, no, it isn't, because there was a day literally a week ago where the sun was shining and it was 100 degrees. And so when we look at those absolute statements, the goal to me of affirmations is to start changing the stories we tell ourselves and to start changing those absolutes and the ways that we think about ourselves. That to me is the power of affirmations. Therefore, those are the types of affirmations that I want to share with the world. One affirmation that really got a lot of traction for me anyway on social media, and I'm probably going to repeat that here because I think it's such a good one, and that is, I am an acquired taste. Not everybody is going to like me, and that's okay. And I feel like that really touched something in people, especially the neurodivergent community that I serve, because that really touched their heart and went, yeah, it's okay that I'm an acquired taste. It's okay that not everybody likes me, because too often we go through our younger years dealing with bullying and not having close friends or not having any friends at all, and finding very hard to find our tribe and find our group. I'm honestly going through a little bit of that myself in a community that I'm in. I feel, I've been in this community for 20 plus years. I have a lot of knowledge to share. I have a lot of things to give to this community. And I could just be dust for all that it matters because I just don't get any traction there. And so, for me, that's a reminder, hey, it's okay that I haven't found my community yet. It's okay that in this space, I'm still looking for my tribe. And that affirmation help counters those negative stories that creep back, because we don't ever really get rid of those negative stories. We simply learn new stories. You don't ever forget that horrible movie. Oh God, I still remember this horrible movie that we got from Netflix. Netflix back in the day when they sent DVDs out. That's how long ago it was. And we lost the DVD, never sent it back, ended up buying this god awful like pseudo history fantasy weird movie, and I still remember that, obviously, because I'm telling you about it. And so we never, our bad stories are, I shouldn't say bad stories, but the stories that aren't helpful that we tell ourselves, we never forget those. We simply tell ourselves new stories. We see new movies. We replace that with better and better and better material. And there's some value judgments there that I feel like I need to work on some more, but material that serves us in a more appropriate way. And so when you do an affirmation like that, that is what you're trying to do, is you're trying to replace those old stories to give your mind something that serves it better. And let's talk about why that's so important for neurodivergent people. Obviously, I've discussed the stories we tell ourselves, the fact that many of us went through things, in our younger lives, even as adults, that really generated these bad stories that we need to change. But I think there's also something to the fact of the way that our minds work. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's been talk in the autistic community on Twitter recently about how not so much that we can't lie, but lying feels unnatural to us, and lying doesn't feel good to us. And I certainly don't want to imply that if you're neurotypical, it's easy for you to lie. But there was talk about social nuance, social meanings, social conventions around lying, about there's certain times when it's appropriate to lie. There are certain times when it's not appropriate to lie. And a lot of times as autistic people, for one, we have a hard time picking up on those social cues. And so discovering those points, when is it okay to lie? When is it not okay to lie? But also, who does it serve to lie? If you ask somebody, do you want Mexican food? And they say yes when they don't. So if they lie and say yes, well, is it serving them to lie so they don't have to deal with an uncomfortable conversation? Well, no, actually Mexican food doesn't quite sit well with me right now. Could we go to this, American fast casual place, or could we go to the Chinese restaurant? And then you get into the difficult conversation. Well, this food has this ingredient. It doesn't work well with me. There's sensory issues. The person may want to avoid that altogether and lie. The neurodivergent person may not want to get into that whole back and forth, or may see nothing wrong in stating their access needs and saying, no, actually, I don't feel like Mexican today. I want to go to my favorite restaurant. Or I want to go try this new restaurant. Usually, though, it's our favorite restaurant. It takes a lot sometimes for my spouse and I to go try new places. Although it's been ages since we've eaten out. So that's probably a moot point at this point, place, and time. So there's the social conventions around lying, but there's also just the feel of it. I know when you get into a situation where you don't want to do something, you try to find an excuse, well, I don't want to do this, but you don't want to say, I don't want to do this because that may interact and invite people saying, well, you never want to do anything. So it's often easier to say, oh, I'm not feeling well, if they know you have a chronic illness, for example. I'm very guilty about saying, well, my health will prevent me from doing this, because then it's like, oh, I really would want to. And in that case, again, that's not necessarily being blunt honest, but it's not lying. So you're actually saying, this is true, but something else may be more true, and it's just easier to avoid that confrontation to say what's true. I feel like I'm kind of getting off track here, but we don't want to lie to ourselves. We don't want to tell ourselves things that aren't true. And it's also hard to imagine the things that aren't true. I'm sure that if there's any manifestation or, money coaches out there listening to this, what I'm about to say is probably going to raise alarms with them, and they'd be like, oh, this person needs to do a lot of work around X, Y, Z. Well, maybe that's true, but also, as somebody who has lived in poverty for about the last series of years, it's, very difficult for me to imagine having $100,000. And in fact, when we talk about, well, what do we need to survive? The number is much lower than that. Just remember, I live in rural Missouri. And so, things are much different down here than they would be, say, in a large major city. So, when you think about how would it be if I won the lottery and had millions of dollars? Well, I can't really imagine that. And some would say, well, you lack imagination. You need to stretch your money muscle. Whatever the gurus are talking about there, the affirmation coaches, the law of attraction coaches. But also, I think part of it has to do with not wanting to lie to ourselves and not wanting to be authentic and be our authentic selves. It is much easier for me, for example, to imagine making a figure that we figured out would be quite nice living for us. I can totally imagine myself making that and being fine financially, but going above that becomes a lie. Now, maybe once I reach a certain point, I can think a little bit higher, but I think it's important to know that we can't just pull affirmations out of thin air. Let me bring this back to affirmations. We can't bring affirmations out of thin air. We have to have them rooted in reality. And then there becomes the why. Why am I imagining that I make $1 million a year when $60,000, $70,000 would be glorious? And so when you start to think about, well, why? I don't need that much money. Would it be lovely? Yes, I could help so many people, help so many causes. There's so much I could do with that, but I don't need that kind of money. And really, am I wishing for $1 million for me, or am I wishing for $1 million to serve capitalism? Whoa, that is a big... That's going to take a whole podcast to unpack the whole... Are we imagining it for us, or are we imagining it to serve capitalism? And that actually might be fun to unpack. So I might throw that down on my podcast idea notepad. But the thing is, we have to know the why behind it. Well, why am I imagining this figure? Okay, this figure means I can do X, Y, Z, A, B, C without any stress or trouble. This figure means that I can help out my aging parents. This figure means I could send, $500 a month to my friends who need help. This figure means this or that or this or that. There's some education I would like to do once I'm done with college. And so it's like, well, this figure means I could afford to do this further education that I would like to do that is kind of outside the normal college financial aid type system. You can think about all of that, and that starts to get to your authentic self. And I think that's how I kind of want to wind this podcast down, is that when we think about affirmations, The goal of the affirmation is to bring you closer to your authentic self, to help you hatch your authentic self, as I say here at the Chicken Yogi. And so when we look at those affirmations, the ones that I share with you, it is my most sincere desire and my most sincere hope that I will be sharing that with you, and that it will help bring you closer to your authentic self, because these are affirmations that have helped bring me closer to my authentic self. And so that to me is the real role of affirmations, especially among the neurodivergent community or the chronically ill community. I haven't talked about, chronic illness affirmations, and maybe again, that would be a whole nother podcast, because there's quite a stretch if you have a condition that causes widespread pain, maybe muscle weakness, maybe you can't do things that you once could do. An affirmation of I have a strong and healthy body may make you break out in giggles. I mean, that you may be like, yeah, for me, for my condition. So again, the affirmation should bring you closer to your authentic self. I am pleased with things that I can do in this body. I am pleased with the way that this body helps me do X. Things like that, changing your wording of your affirmations will bring you closer to your authentic self without diminishing their power. And just to kind of end here, I know I said that before, but I think when you think about affirmations in this way, instead of thinking about them as pie in the sky, things that you don't have right now, but ways to bring you incrementally closer to your authentic self, I don't want you to think about them as, being diminished. I don't want you to think about them as being less powerful, because the power of an affirmation is the power you give it. And an affirmation of, it's okay for me to rest. I am restoring my body when I take a break. It's okay for me to love my special interests. Even when you make those so-called small affirmations, those can be very, very powerful if those are the stories that you need to work on right now. So I really want to thank you for being with me while we talk about neurodiversity and affirmations. As I said, I think this is a topic, affirmations in general, and ways to become your authentic self through affirmations. I feel like this is a topic I'm going to be addressing in the future. I would love to hear from you. Go to my website, chickenyogi.com, click on the contact page, drop me a note, tell me what you think. Or go to, podcast.chickenyogi.com. Again, drop me a note, tell me what you think. Or if you follow me on social media, you can reach out to me through social media. I would love to hear what you think about the thoughts of affirmations and maybe how you use affirmations in your own life. Take care. Be kind to yourself. Thank you for listening to The Chicken Yogi Show, the podcast that brings you stories and wisdom from the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. The Chicken Yogi Show is presented on the Akiam Radio Network and is supported by Chicken Yogi. Learn more about Kit's work at chickenyogi.com. Sign up for free Reiki and spiritual support, or schedule a paid session for more in-depth work. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow The Chicken Yogi on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as the podcast that you're listening to. Listen to all episodes and get show notes at chickenyogishow.com. Thank you for listening. Have a condition that causes widespread pain, maybe muscle weakness, maybe you can't do things that you once could do, an affirmation of I have a strong and healthy body may make you break out in giggles. I mean, that you may be like, yeah, for me, for my condition. So again, the affirmation should bring you closer to your authentic self. I am pleased with things that I can do in this body. I am pleased with the way that this body helps me do X. things like that, changing your wording of your affirmations will bring you closer to your authentic self without diminishing their power. And just to kind of end here, I know I said that before, but I think when you think about affirmations in this way, instead of thinking about them as pie in the sky, things that you don't have right now, but ways to bring you incrementally closer to your authentic self, I don't want you to think about them as, being diminished. I don't want you to think about them as being less powerful, because the power of an affirmation is the power you give it. And an affirmation of, it's okay for me to rest. I am restoring my body when I take a break. It's okay for me to love my special interests. Even when you make those so-called small affirmations, those can be very, very powerful if those are the stories that you need to work on right now. So I really want to thank you for being with me while we talk about neurodiversity and affirmations. As I said, I think this is a topic, affirmations in general, and ways to become your authentic self through affirmations. I feel like this is a topic I'm going to be addressing in the future. I would love to hear from you. Go to my website, chickenyogi.com, click on the contact page, drop me a note, tell me what you think. Or go to, podcast.chickenyogi.com. Again, drop me a note, tell me what you think. Or if you follow me on social media, you can reach out to me through social media. I would love to hear what you think about the thoughts of affirmations and maybe how you use affirmations in your own life. Take care. Be kind to yourself. Thank you for listening to The Chicken Yogi Show, the podcast that brings you stories and wisdom from the Chicken Yogi, Kit Kilstow. The Chicken Yogi Show is presented on the Akiam Radio Network and is supported by Chicken Yogi. Learn more about Kit's work at chickenyogi.com. Sign up for free Reiki and spiritual support, or schedule a paid session for more in-depth work. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow The Chicken Yogi on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as the podcast that you're listening to. Listen to all episodes and get show notes at chickenyogishow.com. Thank you for listening. For more in-depth work. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow The Chicken Yogi on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as the podcast that you're listening to. Listen to all episodes and get show notes at chickenyogishow.com. Thank you for listening.